Rats here at chess.com to analyze a game submitted by Wakas GRD for my member best game thread, and he wanted some help here to know what his mistakes were. This game ended up in a draw. It was played at a time control of one move every day. A little too quick. I tried it once and I don't like it. But anyway, let's run through it. So far we have an Indian defense, the older Queen C2 line. When they were playing about 90 years ago, it was all the rage. I'm not going to go into all the other lines of the Indian, but generally black often parts with the bishop pair but gets an active game. His knights will be good, and there's a lot of interesting strategies with the Indian. One of them is that eventually black will double some of white's pawns, but not in this case. The queen going to C2 stops that, and black will try to make targets out of them. But here white doesn't take with the queens and allows himself to get double pawns. And white now has an option. Well, not yet. You can't push d5. You're going to drop a pawn. But at some point, black will put his pawns on. Often put his pawns on dark squares, the opposite color of his bishop, so his bishop has mobility, and then try to counterattack this. Maybe counterattack this pawn on c4. One method is this queen will get down to a5, and then a4. The knight will go to a5, and this bishop will go to a6, and they're all piling up on this little pawn here. That's one of the strategies, but we're so far from that, it's not incredible, or it's not funny. And d5 is one of the older treatments. I've seen people use this. It's one of the main lines. The objection I have to it is it places black's pawn on the color of his bishop. As I was saying just a moment ago, often black will set up pawns on the dark squares. But it's certainly playable, and it's what black chose. And here, let's just stop and take stock. Usually when you give up the bishop pair, you can, in the opening, you gain some tempos while doing it, and black certainly has done that. Black's got two minor pieces and his queen out, and he's castled. White still has to develop both bishops and castle, so for what it's worth, black is ahead in development. So what should white do here? Okay, what white plays is c4, but let's back that up a second. I think, I'm not sure, this is probably a book position in theory, and probably everything's been tried here before, maybe even the c4. But I'm thinking there's never anything wrong with just developing. Bishop e2 is safe, simple, and to the point. It gets white ready to castle. He'll solve what to do with this bishop later. This bishop doesn't have a lot of mobility. It's shut in. Even if it goes to b2, it's shut in. Well, this happens in the Indian. It's the price of acquiring the two bishops. You want to exercise your option with the bishops later. So just from a strategic point of view, bishop e2 is probably the better move, and then make black justify his position. I often black will counter with an e5 move and try and liquidate the center and take advantage of the fact that if the board opens up, his pieces are quicker developed and able to take advantage of the open squares. Let's just look at one line. I don't know if this is all theory, but I think black can play e5 here. Now black is crawling all over d4, so white needs to do something by crawling all over. Okay, the knight's on it, the pawn's on it, this pawn's on it, and the queen's on it. So how's white going to rectify this? He's got three defenders. He's got the knight and a couple pawns. So one way is just to develop a piece and put a fourth defender on it. And now black has a lot of options. Black can develop this bishop. It's not really threatening to take this knight to remove a defender because this bishop will take back with tempo. But let's just for a moment assume that black liquidates the center, as I was saying. this is one of the strategies is that Black's saying, I'm a little better developed than you are. I'll trade pieces with you. Okay, so now, whoop. How did that bishop end up on c4? My goodness. Okay, this bishop. Okay, I'm just going to hover it here. Okay, so if it stayed. Okay. The point being here that what Black has done is developed a piece with tempo, and I guess g2's hanging. We have to watch out for that. I didn't see that, but the whole point here is the center is opened up, and Black is content to rely on better development to carry him through. White must deal with his queen. How can he do that? Queen b2 gets it out of some danger and has some indirect pressure on f6 and g7. Black, of course, could maybe go and grab this pawn. I'm not sure White can allow that. So let's see. Maybe White's going to have to take with the pawn, and now White's got an isolated pawn here. But once again, Black's getting developed. Okay, the queen is attacked with tempo, so let's put it back on d2, and Black can just continue with his development. Maybe consider rook here, c8 or d8 as the arrows show, and White's got the advantage of the bishop pair. That's it, and essentially the game is basically even, but that's what you're going to expect. But White needs to get his development done, and so c4 doesn't develop, but it does have the advantage that it attacks the Black queen. But White has to cover d4 here shortly, and he does it with bishop b2. Now this takes the sting out of e5. That's one nice thing about it. It activated this bishop, so it's one advantage that c4 has. But still, the one drawback in the White position is this bishop is not developed. White cannot castle. So Black plays actively in the center, and now White's got the proverbial hanging pawns. Now it's often that Black has these hanging pawns in variations like the Queen's Gambit declined Tartakower variation, and I just did a video on this in the game just before this where Black had hanging pawns, and I always refer people that are trying to learn a little bit about the strategy to locate the game Korchnoi-Karpov first match game in Murano, Italy, 1981 for the World's Championship. And the annotations in Players Chess News were excellent. They were just superb. Essentially what happened, this match is also known as the Massacre in Murano. They had played a World Championship match in '78 that went down to the last game. And in this one, Karpov just rolled him over. Poor Korchnoi didn't have a chance. But to a large degree, it goes back to that first game. Korchnoi, with White, was playing against Karpov's hanging pawns, and Karpov didn't buckle. He just slowly but surely started gradually improving his position, keeping it solid, and at the right moment, these pawns can advance, and suddenly the tactical possibilities arise, and that's what Karpov did, and he won it brilliantly. And of course, I just messed the whole game up and was never the same after that. The match was quickly a rout. But if you locate the game, it's easy to find. You can get an idea how to play with the hanging pawns. So for White looking a way to improve his play, this would certainly be a good launching point. So Black plays rook d8. And here comes, I think, the critical juncture of the game. Okay, let's examine this for a moment. Black's pressuring e5 still. Okay, there's three guys on it. But it's not in danger because Black's got heavy artillery on it, the queen and the rook. Okay, for Black to win the pawn on d4, he has to give up his queen, right, for a piece. So this is the time for White to play bishop e2. Now, maybe this is book. Maybe there's something in here that I'm not seeing. I don't know. But bishop e2 just makes total sense. Again, you can rarely go wrong if you develop your pieces, and that's what White needs to do, is to develop his pieces and get castled and get the rooks into play. And then White can operate with the basic idea of having these hanging pawns, finding the right tactical moment to advance one. Like, for instance, if you advance one, this is the one you want to advance because it opens up this bishop into play. So what's going to happen here? Let's look at a possible variation. Again, I call it fantasy chess. It's just one possible line, and the way I do is I choose developing moves for both sides, and I just analyze those and go from there. So if White plays bishop e2 and Black plays b6, White should castle. Now that part's done, and now both sides continue their development. And here we have it. We have this set up. And notice the hanging pawns are still there. They're still mobile. They still have a possibility at some point to advance and generate some tactical activity against the Black king. And, it's definitely not a forced win. The game is still dynamically even. White enjoys the bishop pair. That's what all White enjoys. The game, that particular game I showed you, will give an idea how to defend against, or how to play with the hanging pawns and how not to play against them. So it can give an idea if you have this position again as White, if you get in this variation, or even play the Black side of it, it can give you some idea of how to handle the hanging pawns. Now, if you trade off too many pieces, then the hanging pawns become a liability because they cannot guard each other or be guarded by another pawn. They must be guarded by pieces. Even if one advances, if there's an exchange, you're going to end up with an isolated pawn, and it may become a target. And it may become a pass pawn, but it's not an outside pass pawn, and it won't require as much attention. But this strategically is the best way to play it, and the game is still even. You're going to have to just outmaneuver your opponent, or await a mistake when your opponent doesn't understand how to do it. Objectively, when you hit the master level, like myself, I play against people ELO 1900, and often they can just sit there. Like the game, case in point, the other night, I was playing a tournament game against an 1808, and he rolled with the punches. I picked up a very slight advantage. He out of the opening, positional. That was all I got. I just got this little advantage, and I had long-term endgame possibilities with it. And he basically played a good game. He didn't blunder. He got a little carried away trying to attack my king, which actually gave me the attacking chances. And he still had pretty much an even game when he blundered. But I was in a position where I knew how to play it. And oftentimes, if your opponent doesn't know how to play a certain position, they will blunder. And they're not going to play perfect chess unless they're close to perfect chess, unless they're up at the master level or higher. And when you understand how to play a position from a master point of view, then it makes it easier to win positions like this with either Black or White. As I say, Korchnoi had, in effect, the Black version of this position as White, but he couldn't refute it. And then the pawns advanced, and it was game over. And but had Korchnoi played it correctly, the game probably would have ended up in a draw. So you just have to learn how to know how to play it. And the best example I can give on how to use these hanging pawns is that one particular game. Now, Wait, went too far back. Okay. Now at this point, this is c5 is not a bad move. Okay, it's just not the best move. What it did was and does is it takes away the whole aspect of having those hanging pawns and being able to tactically advance d5 at some point. It immediately hands the d5 square to black. Okay, so as long as black's careful, he will maintain equality here too. Let's see how it continues. Okay, now at some point, here we are at move 14. White's going to have to get developed in castle. This is a long time. It's getting risky here. To some degree, though, you know, black's queenside's a little cramped here. It's hard to see how his bishop gets any scope, but let's just see how it happens. Black plays h6. It's okay to play a move like h6 here. It frees this knight so that you don't have to worry about losing this pawn, because this knight wants a square, d5. Okay, so h6 is a good move in this case. And then black develops. And then white tries to find a new diagonal for his bishop. Black retreats the queen. So, you know, it looks to some degree like white's making a little bit of progress here. His bishop is better off on b2 or on c1 than it was on b2, only because it has a longer range. But here's your problem, d5. Black has that square now. Black didn't have it before. Okay, white just gave it to him. And it's not clear how white's going to make progress here. We'll move on and see. Now the bishop parks itself here. And then black just reinforces the knight. White develops that rook. Black develops his. White covers his back rank. And now black decides that I'm cramped, I don't have any freedom here. I'm going to try to make some exchanges and get some breathing room for my pieces. Because really, how else can black proceed here? He's kind of suffocated. I mean, he can play bishop c6. Well, big deal. You know, white will play knight e5 and threaten to grab the two bishops, but still, black has some good knights. But I think b6 is thematic here. And then white covers the c2 square. And now the pawn on c5 is pinned, so white retreats the queen. And now let's think about it. What has white really accomplished here? The queen has gone back to her original square. What's the idea now? Bishop b1 and get the queen on this diagonal and come down and check? Well, that takes a few moves. Okay, so black just continues, improving his position little by little. Okay. Black does the same. White grabs this square. And black retreats his bishop. So, you know, white's made some inroad, but once again, black owns this square. Okay. So here, this was coming for a while. Now here it is. But black has a resource. He just drops his knight back to cover that square and offers a queen exchange, which white makes. And white's got to be careful here. There's, you know, not only does black have this square under control, this bishop could get in trouble if this d file opens up. So white's got to watch that. I'll show you. I'll show in just a moment. Here it is. If white wants now to make a pass pawn, he runs into a problem. And here it is, knight c6, to get rid of the defender of the bishop on d3. Okay, what's white going to do? If white takes this knight, black takes the bishop, and white's got a loose knight and a loose pawn. He's going to drop a pawn. Yes, you got a pass pawn out of it, but he doesn't have enough compensation. Okay, let's just take a quick look. Now just grab this. Now you want to shove it. Well, how far can it go? It looks like it's risky to maybe try to get it to c7 because black will start trying to surround it, and here it looks like it's lost. And on c6 it's somewhat of a target. Black can add another attacker to it, but anyway, White's struggling for equality here. He really gets no winning chances. So as much as he'd like to get a pass pawn, he can't. He has to stop and take here. And now this pawn is now isolated. It is already backward on an open file, and black still controls d5. But all's not over yet. When we get to the final position here shortly, we'll talk about where it was agreed drawn. We can talk about it a little bit more. Okay, now they exchange another piece, and this it's looking more and more like it'll end up in a draw. But White still has some play, and in that White still does have the two bishops for what they're worth, and White's rook is a little bit better than the black rook here. But black just says, let's trade. And White says, okay, I'll trade, but give me a pass pawn. And black says, phooey. And now, once again, White has the more active rook. And this is played to keep a knight out of f4. Could be a nuisance at some point, especially if this king tries to run. And at this point, the game was agreed a draw. And I don't think White has to give the draw just yet. There's still some tries here. Okay, let's talk about them. How can White continue? Well, the move that I think screaming to be tried is bishop b4. Okay, what does this do? Well, this bishop's never had much scope in the whole game. I'm trying to get it some scope. Okay. I'm saying I want to put it on c5. I want to pressure you on a7. So it gives black some interesting options. What does he do? Does he take it? Well, this helps White a little bit, because now White's gotten rid of a piece that can't control this key square of d5, and now White's in business. Okay. For playing for a win, I think. Okay, let's just suppose for a moment that, I just want to illustrate a point. Let's suppose for a moment black plays knight d5. Says, well, hey, I still got a knight into d5. Well, here comes this great move, bishop d4, and it looks like black's dropping a pawn. How can he save that pawn on d5? So black's got to maneuver a little bit before he can do that. He's got to, let's see, this rook is tied down. Let's try to free the rook. Let's play king c7, and so we can get the rook free. Now I'll put the king on b7, and the purpose of this is, like I say, so that this rook has some scope. And let's see. Here's a position where White could check. Okay, now we've reached this position. We're going to give up the bishop pair, or the fact that we're going to take a knight versus bishop ending. Now, here, black's control of d5 means very little in this position, and it means very little simply because White doesn't care about that score anymore. What he's worried about now is winning with a good knight versus a bad bishop. In other words, White figures his knight can do some things and can have more of an effect on this position than the black bishop. Now, White's not winning, but White has something to play for. Okay, this is just a sample line, just to give you an idea. What's White playing for? Well, like I say, we want to use the good knight versus the bad bishop. This knight is shutting this bishop out of the game. Okay, so one thing black can do is just say, hey, I'll trade it off. And I think if White trades, a draw is virtually assured. So what white should do is put the king on a dark square. Now there's a threat down here, and then black kicks it, and now this knight redeploys, and it's now headed for c5, a square that black can't oppose. Now is this enough for a win? No, but it's enough to get something to play for. So now let's get this rook activated, and we'll, well, you can't, this pawn's going to drop. Let's see. So maybe we have to put the rook here, and we still give this check. Drop the king. Put the king forward. Probably survive that. Okay, it's white to play, and maybe it's time for f4 here because black's trying to play e5. White's got something. He doesn't have much, but it's something, and it's something that actually looks like white's winning. Well, let's back this up. Maybe this king can't go to b6 because we're getting on the 7th rank. So the moment he checks, black's got to retreat the king. And this is fine for white. White's got a much better king. His rook's more active. His knight's more active. I don't know, b5. What about just go back to my idea, f4? Okay, f4. That looks fine. It's I guess black can still play e5, but let's see, takes. Now here's where we shove by, putting on a white square, but we figure that this pawn is weak, and we're going to tie black down to guarding both of those pawns, and now we have a potential to create a pass pawn on the king side. Enough to win? Probably not with correct play, but it's enough to play for a win, and it's possible white can win this game. So even when going back to the position when the draw was agreed, again, and this line wasn't forced by any means, but white still had some plans, or he still had some ideas. So what does black do other than take this bishop? I think that's incorrect. What else does he do? Well, this knight's good. Let's try to drive it out of there. Okay. Well, white may still play this move and say, go ahead, take my bishop. I'll take a pass pawn. And if you take the knight, you've got to deal with this pawn, and that's a problem. White seems to be winning it. So black's still got some problems here. How's he going to solve it? How do you guard a7? You don't. So knight d7 is not a good move, unless you give willing to give the pass pawn up. Give white the pass pawn. Okay, take. Now you can take with the pawn. Now white's got the pass pawn. And we'll go back to some of the other ideas. King c7. But again, white's got chances to play. He can keep playing. He's not losing this. The only way white can get in trouble here is if he drops the pawn on c5 somehow, and I don't see exactly how black wins it. His king can't get to c6. Got to take away the knight first from occupying that square. But white's got some winning chances here. I don't know who offered the draw, but nothing wrong with the draw. But at the same time, it's one that in correspondence chess there are points to be had by playing out endings, because if you really understand endgames and your opponent doesn't as well as you're going to win more often than you'll draw, I believe, because endings are their own art form. And the series I use is the Overbach series 8-volume set, comprising of all the potential one-piece versus one-piece endings plus king and pawn endings. And here, you'd have to, if you were using those books, How to Proceed, you'd have to use most of them. Rook versus rook, knight versus knight, bishop versus bishop, bishop versus knight, as well as king and pawn endings. And it's possible to get into a rook versus minor piece ending, but not as likely. But you can learn a lot about endings when you're playing them, as my video lesson 001 points out. Endings are the time to learn endings. You're learning them while you're playing them, when they count. You're not studying an ending that you may never see. You're studying and learning an ending while you're playing it. And then if trying to solve this over the board is, in effect, I'm doing. I'm just analyzing, showing some ideas. It doesn't mean any of these lines are forced, doesn't mean any of these lines will happen, But face it, when you're playing a chess game, you analyze 20, 30, 40, 50 variations that never come up. Only one variation will appear, the one you actually play. But you're ready to meet all the potential variations and ready to continue if you should choose a different move. But anyway, play these out. Get your hands on good endgame material and play them out. One volume that's really advanced, that's really good, is the one by Sherezhevsky. What's it called? Can't even think of the title. Endgame Strategy, and it's just like the name Rizhevsky, the famous American player, both with an SHE on the beginning. Sherezhevsky. It's a great book. Covers all different kinds of multiple piece endings and various advanced strategies to employ, because that's where you win games in the ending. It definitely happens on the grandmaster level. They get down to an ending and one has to try to win it. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to look at this. There's plenty to learn from this, plenty of practice to be had, and best chess to you all. See you next video. Take care.